Good morning, Morai, Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing our Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and we are on Daf Dalit, Amud Aleph, 12 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shelema for Daniela Bat Rachel and Manzal Bat Satanat Goltaj, dedicated by Dan family, also dedicated and sponsored anonymously for Refuah Shelema of Daniel Moshe Ben Farangis and Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, also for Refuah Shelema of Sarah Bat Mina by Taban family, and it is co-sponsored by Tzaddik family, Leilu Nishmat Shoshana Bat Yehuda, and by Pakodor family, Leilu Nishmat Mordechai Ben Jalal and Muhtaram Bat Mordechai. It was also sponsored Leilu Nishmat Betzalel Ben Rafael Esther by Mahbubi family. This was also being learned as a schut for the proper shidduch of David Chaim Ben Ephraim by Shraga family. This week's learnings of the community has been graciously dedicated by Shei family and Mahbubi family. It should be an ultimate schut for all their mishpachot. Amen. So we have, before we go on in our Amud today, we have to go back. We are about to just touch on one element that we learned yesterday, and that is the Gemara on top of the Amud when Daryavish, who sponsored and basically foot the bill for not just the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, but also he basically sponsored the day-to-day operation of the Beit HaMikdash, is a tremendous level of tzedakah. And yet the Gemara said, the way we know that Daryavesh was hichmitz, he went sour, he went bad, is because he told them, you bring these are all the animals and all the material that you need for the Beit HaMikdash, and you bring korbanot, and you daven for my life, for my success, and for my children's success. And so you see from here that it was alternative motive, and that's not good. I says, wait a second. We learn in the Gemara Masech Ba'Batra Daf Yud, and that Haomer, I give this staka in order either is chaye olam hazeh or olam haba. Either I want to have good life, my children should live in olam hazeh, or she'ezke lechaye olam haba harezu tzadik gamur. This fellow is a tzadik gamur, at least in regards to the mitzvah of tzedakah, is considered tzadik gamur, like Rabbi Yochanan said, tzedakah gemura. And Gemara said, well, Goyim, Jews, it makes a difference. I want to share with you something amazing, an insight, which is powerful and beautiful. It's brought really in Siftei Chachamim, Rosh Hashanah Daf Dalet, in the name of Maram Banet. It says, Maram Banet, you know what the pshat is? Harezet Tzadik Amur. If you say, this is a tzedakah, you're giving an ani a tzedakah. So this is the tzedakah, I want my son to live. Or it's says Maram Banet. You know what the pshat is? The pshat is you are giving to someone. You're in the giving power. You're powerful. You're giving, and he is the needy. He is the recipient. He feels like a second-class citizen. You know, the Rambam, when talking about the Yilchot Tzedakah, he divides it to 8 different categories of tzedakah. Aside from the fact that if you give job to somebody, that's the highest level of tzedakah. Next level is if you don't know who you're giving to, and he doesn't know who is receiving from, because he's not embarrassed, and you're not going to feel superior to him whenever you see him. Right, that's the highest level of tzedakah. We find more ukva in the Masechet Ketuvot that him and his wife would go and put the coin, slide it underneath the door. And one day, when the recipient really wanted to know who is giving them money every day, they stood behind the door, opened the door, and they run. And he's running after them to know who they are, and they're running because they don't want him to know who they are. They want to keep their thing in the anonymity. and they enter a kivshana esh, they enter a tanur. The Gemara says from here you see mutav. It's better for a person to throw himself into kivshana esh ve'al yalbim perecha v'ro barabim. Right? This concept of anonymity in tzedakah, and says Maram Banet, you know what the pshat is here? So some people are so talented. They give, but they have the talent of making the recipient feel like he's giving them. He says, you know, you're doing such a favor. I have my son. I need Yeshua in my house. And I'm looking for opportunities of mitzvah. You're giving me the opportunity. You're giving me so much more than I'm giving you. Like the Gemara says, in truth, it is that way, right? The Gemara says in Masechet Daf Yud says more than what the Ashir gives to the Ani is giving to the Ashir. More than the same thing with sporting Torah. More than what you're giving to the Kolel is actually providing for you. But to depict that and explain it in a way that now it kind of like diffuses that uncomfortable recipient feeling is a tremendous. That's a tzaddik amur. You know what was a tzaddik amur? When you make the guy feel so good, as if he gave you. Say al menat sheyichyeh beni. Not that you really are giving this tzedakah just because you want your kid to live, but you want the person who is recipient to feel that he's actually giving you more than he is receiving. You make him feel good. And to end this, the Gemara says, there again, there's a whole sugya of tzedakah over there in Batra, where it says, "Hanoten tzela le'ani." When you give a coin to the ani, you get 6 brachot, right? But if you give him a milah tova, if you give him a good word, you make him feel good. You give him a bracha. You give it, even if you don't have the money to give, you're not paying him a penny, but you speak with him, you make him comfortable. You give him a little chizuk, you get 11 brachot, right? So it's a tremendous thing, and that's Harez Tzaddik Amur. It's the way in Siftei Chachamim, in the one-liner in the name of Maram Banet, which is beautiful and gorgeous. Once we add it, he also adds. He says this whole concept of giving, even though that you have some sort of background thought in your mind, and still is considered a full tzedakah. He says, you see it from the Pesukim. He says Naton Titen. When he talks about the pasuk, talks about mitzvah of tzedakah, he says naton titen. It's a two-language giving. Naton titen. One of them is lishma, but even if you're not doing 100% lishma, the rest of the pasuk reads that even though it's betitcha lo ki, you're giving and you're thinking ki. I want to yivarecha b'asher bignal hadavar hazeh yivarecha Hashem Elokecha b'chol ma'aseh yadecha. You're thinking that because of this tzedakah, Hashem is going to return a lot of bracha to you. Aser bishvil shetit asher, you give maaser because you want to be rich. Still, is considered harezu tzaddik amur. He brings this also from other pasukim. It says tzedek tzedek tirdof. The pasuk says a different pasuk, right? Tzedek tzedek to chase after tzedakah, and the pasuk ends saying leman tichyeh, in order to live. So he's coming to teach you that even if you are rodef tzedek leman tichyeh, in order to live, al menat sheyichyeh beni, still harezu tzaddik amur. And he ends with another example from the pasuk. It says, "Ashrei maskil el dal." Fortunate is the person that thinks about dal, a poor person. You're caring about him, even though that the pasuk ends saying, "Beyom ra'ayim aleteu Hashem." In the day of difficulty, Hashem is going to save him back also. So even if you're thinking, when you're maskil el dal, when you're giving to the dal, that one day I'm going to need a Yeshua, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to step in, even that thought that sounds like less than perfect, and it's not necessarily purely lishma, still, it would be fantastic. So that's the first piece of information. Beautiful Siftei Chachamim, beautiful Maram Banet tucked away in Masechet Rosh Hashanah. Daf Dalet, one more piece that's very kedai is really brought by Rabbi Elisha Chaim Horowitz in his fantastic sefer by Chaim about Daryavesh. We kind of like promised to speak about this because it's a very difficult Gemara. It's a bumpy Gemara to learn. We say, well, Daryavesh really foot the bill for the entire. You talk about billions of dollars equivalent of money that he paid from his treasury to go build the Beit HaMikdash. And he said, not only that, but I'm unlimited supply also for The Kohanim, whatever the Kohanim say, I'm not going to even have guards to check to see if they're saying the right thing. Whatever you say that you need for daily operation, you just put it on the treasury. I pay for it. Tremendous, right? No fundraising. Can you imagine that? No yearly fundraiser for Beit HaMikdash. Uncle Sam is paying for everything, and yet the Gemara says Tichmitz, because he said daven for me. It's already chametz. What is that? Is that hakarat tov? Is that really bad that he asked for them to daven? So says the Bar Chai, an ingenious pshat. Listen to what he says. He first brings from Zohar Kadosh. So Zohar Kadosh Parshat Vayishlach, Daf Kutzah Mechket. Says David HaMelech was supposed to live 0 years. He was born with no years. And Adam HaRishon had to give him 70 years. That's why he lived not 1,000 years, even though that he was supposed to live one day of Hashem, right? So he had to borrow years for his very existence. So says the Bar Chai, he brings from the Mekubalim write, Kezot hi suratah umauta shel sefirat ubeskinat malchut. We're getting a little bit into Kabbalistic ideas about my pay grade, but we can simple understanding of it is pashut, that the sfirah of malchut in the Eser Sfirot is the very lowest one that kind of like accepts all the Sfirot up above. Is a recipient. Unlike malchut in the eyes of the goyim, I'm the melech, I'm the giver, I'm the mashpia. By us, by the Jews, the melech is let le migarmeh klum, as the Zohar Kadosh calls it. He has nothing of his own. So says, therefore, the Zohar Kadosh, David HaMelech, didn't even have years. Even his years of life itself, he accepted from Adam HaRishon. Le migarmeh klum. He's like a vessel of being in a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then being able to give, reflect that to the people. And therefore, by the way, the thing of Melech is, by the Sfirah Malchut, is Bechinat Sihara Delete Migabre Klum. His moon is the Bechinat Malchut. Moon also has nothing of his own, no light of its own. It just reflects the light of others. So that's the Bechinah of Malchut, right? Ends up saying actually at the end, that's why every time that you find Seudat Rosh Chodesh in Tanakh is by a Melech, right? Shaul HaMelech, and so on and so forth, because that is the concept of Malchut. Synthetically, if you could add a little bit, perhaps that's why the Gemara Masechet Sukkah says that Jews are example to Levana, because we don't have our own light, we reflect the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Or like Goyim, it's not our own light, but we reflect the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the world. So says, based on this, the Bechia, the Bechia says, it's an amazing insight. It says, basically understand, that's not that Daryavesh became a Rasha. No, he's still a tremendous tzaddik. But as far as a king, a Jewish king, we were counting him as a Jewish king until now. A Jewish king is let le mikarmeh klum. He has none of his own selfish ideas in his mind as a Jewish king. David HaMelech is actually a good example. He doesn't bring it, but I'll just explain a little bit. David HaMelech has no sense of self in his government. He had arch enemies. The two top arch enemies of David HaMelech were Doeg HaEdomi, the head of Sanhedrin, Bir Aroim, and Chitofel, the smartest man alive. And they wanted him dead. And yet, he says, V'ani b'chalotam levushi sak. When they get sick, I will sackcloth in neti batsom nafshi. I will fast, sit on the floor, cry that they should ever fast. Why? Because Klal Yisrael needs them. Why? They're my arch enemy. It doesn't matter, right? But when he got to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's enemies, people who disrespect Hashem, he says to Tehillim, someone that hates you, Hashem, I'll kill them, right? The most hatred, I hate them, my enemies. So enemies, I daven for them. They're not my enemies. Your enemies, my arch enemies. And nothing of self there. That's a Melech Yisrael. So Daryavesh, it's a big shoe to fill. Daryavesh in the beginning was like that. But the moment that he has his own thing on top of for me and my family also, he's still a good person. But to count him as a Melech Israel, that already we are not. That's the. It's not that he became a Rasha, but to count him as a Melech Israel is to be someone that's let lemigar mekelum, that has no self involved in his melucha, and that much he did lose. Now we also promised to speak about Daryavesh being Jewish or not Jewish, because we explained that there are at least 2 or maybe 3 indications, clear indications in our Gemara over here that Daryavesh was a goy. But really, the Midrash in Esther Rabbah in Perek Chet, the Midrash says clearly that Daryavesh II was the son of Esther and Achashverosh. So that makes you Jewish. Last we checked. And Tosafot here actually in Rav Gimel also says the same thing. So we have to reconcile: was Daryavesh really Jewish, or what was he not Jewish? And how do we deal with having a Jewish, nice Jewish boy in a Persian palace? That's something that we, because of lack of time, we're going to come back to. Bezat maybe in a different piece. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. Maybe we'll leave it for tomorrow. Because we have, in that note, we have a Amud to cover. So 12 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. One last attempt. The Gemara attempted 3 different attempts to explain why Daryavesh became chametz, became sour. He lost his status as a Jewish king. Now, one last, but failed this time, attempt, says the Gemara, Ibayit Emam. If you want, I could tell you. Menalan the Ichmitz. So I know that Daryavesh became chametz. From here. Because it says, At kesef kikrin me'ah, vat chantin kurin me'ah, vat chamar betrin me'ah. All of the material that were needed for the operation of the Beit HaMikdash has, it actually has a number of how many units did he provide for the Beit HaMikdash. Remember, yesterday was unlimited. He said, whatever you guys say, I'll give. And now he says he gave this much of this, that much of that. He put a cap to it. So the Gemara says, in the beginning, he had no kitzbah, he had no cap to it. He said, whatever you guys say, and now it became limited. So you see, he became chametz. One says, no, that's not true necessarily. In the beginning, he's saying, go build. I don't know what's involved in the building of the Beit HaMikdash. Now he knows exactly what he doesn't want to oversupply on a weekly basis. His storage is the problem too, right? So he figured it out how much you need based on weekly or monthly, whatever it is, and he's sending you a reoccurring donation. That's not a problem. And so the Gemara retracts from this last attempt. It says those 3 that we mentioned, those are the ones, but this 4th one is not necessarily true. Now, next piece of the Mishnah that we had was that Echad Ben Nisan is Rosh Hashanah leMelachim ve'Argalim. So we explained how Rosh Chodesh Nisan is Rosh Hashanah for Melachim Malchei Israel. The nafka mina, the halachic difference is starot, right? Shtakuksam is pasul, Ruva, all those we discussed. The second item in the Mishnah is that it's also Rosh Hashanah leRegalim. What does that mean? It's the beginning of the count of the Shalosh Regalim. Regalim be'echad Nisanu, 15 b'Nisanu. Says Regalim, we have no regel, we have no chag on Echad b'Nisan. Sach is 15th of Nisan, right? It's not. Wait, there's a Havamina in the beginning of Haggadah Shel Pesach. In Magid says Yachol Mirosh Chodesh, but it's not really the chag. Pesach starts from 15th of Nisan. So the Gemara says, yeah, correct. Really, Rosh Hashanah Regalim is 15th of Nisan. So why do we say Be'echad B'Nisan? Amar Chisda Regel Shebo Rosh Hashanah Regalim. This is a month, right, that in it there is Rosh Hashanah Regalim. So in the month of Nisan there is Rosh Hashanah Regalim, which is 15th of Nisan. So says the Gemara, Nafka Mina, what's the halachic nafka? Who cares? Who cares if Pesach is first and then Shavuot and then Sukkot? When there's a cycle, anything that's a cycle, you can start from any year, right? It's like, where's the beginning of a circle? I don't know. Wherever you choose is the beginning of the circle. It's round. So it's the same thing. It could be Pesach is the first, Shavuot is the first, Sukkot is the first. So what's the halachic chiluk that he makes to say that Pesach is the first? It says the Gemara, nafka mina lenoder is for a person that makes a neder, and make a person that makes a neder, there is a mitzvah of bal tacher. When you make a neder, you can't delay it too much. It's actual isur from the Torah not to delay your nidarim too much. Right? Pasuk says, "Ki titor neder l'Hashem." When you make a neder for Hakadosh Baruch Hu, lo tacher leshalemo. Do not delay. What does it mean? Do not delay. I have to do it the same day, right? There's a mitzvah paying a worker that same day, right? Al talin. I go to sleep when you haven't paid a Jewish worker, depending on when he finishes his job. If he finishes 2 minutes before Shkia, you have 2 minutes to pay him. That's called before night. Now you can't let the day pass and you haven't paid. So that's within the day. So when you make a neder, bal tacher, don't be lazy, don't delay. What does that mean? How much time do I have? So that's going to be the sugya of discussion for today. So says the Gemara, what does it mean? Rabbi Shimon, it's the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. Now we'll soon see that in the first bright of the Gemara is going to bring, there are 2 shitas. In the second bright, there's 5 different shitas of what the mitzvah of Bal Tacher is consist of. So says the Gemara, it's the shita of Rabbi Shimon, right? As Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said. The Tanya, as we learned in the bright, this is the first bright. Whether you make a neder or you make something hekdesh to be donated to the Bedek HaBayit of the Beit HaMikdash, or you make a neder, I'm going to pay my erech, my value, every person based on age and so on, as a Torah set value. Says the writer, once 3 chagim passes after you made a neder, so you made a neder, 1 chag comes, another one, already you are over on Bal Tacher. Over be Bal Tacher. Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, no, not just regular 3 regalim passing by, but gimel regalim kesidran, it has to be in order. It has to be gimel regalim, shalosh regalim, in order, and now it matters where you start. When do you start? Chag HaMatzot. Right? It starts from Pesach. Now, to this. So if I make a neder right before Chag HaPesach, then Pesach comes, Shavuot comes, Sukkot comes, I'm over. But what if I made a neder right after Pesach? Then Shavuot comes, I haven't even started yet. It has to be in order. Sukkot comes, I still haven't started yet. Until 6 months later, when Pesach, the clock starts ticking. Now I have Pesach, the next Shavuot, and the next Sukkot. So 5 regalim are going to pass before I'm over, according to Rabbi Shimon. If I made the neder before, after Shavuot, it's going to be 4, right? And if I made it after Sukkot, then it's going to be 3, right? I think what is going to explain that. Let's go through the motion of reading the details of this. The beginning of the cycle is Rosh Chodesh, Nisan, Rosh Hashanah, Regalim. Therefore, Chag HaMatzot is the first of the cycle. Rabbi Shlomo Yisraeli would say the same thing, that Regalim, Pa'amim, Gimel Pa'amim, sometimes you have 3 Regalim, sometimes Pa'amim Gimel, Pa'amim Dalet, Pa'amim Chamesh. Sometimes 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. That's that. How does that work out? Nadar lifte Pesach. If you made the neder right before Pesach, there's going to be 3, of course, because Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, and you over this. If you did before Atzeret, if you did it before Shavuot, then it's going to be 5, because Shavuot and Sukkot is going to be passing before your clock even starts. Then you have Shavuot, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. It's 5, as we explained before. And if you have Lifnei Chag, if you did it right before Chag HaSukkot, then you have Sukkot passing, then Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, then you have 4. Amazing. So that's the first Braita. 2 shitas. Tanu Rabbanan, the second Braita, now it has 5 shitas. That's these 2 plus another 3. Hayave Hadamin Va'arachin. If you made a neder that you got to pay your worth, your market value to the Beit HaMikdash, or your erech to the Beit HaMikdash, or you made a cherem, right? I said this should be belonging to the Beit HaMikdash. And you made a hekdesh for the Beit HaMikdash. Chataot, ashamot, olot, shlamim, all the korbanot that you donated, you said you got to bring, or you became chayav to bring. Tzedakot. If you donated tzedakah, you made a neder of tzedakah. Umasrot, right? Or a good old time maaser of your produce, right? That you have to bring to the Beit HaMikdash. Bechor, the firstborn of your animals. Maaser behema, right? You have the 1/10 of the newborn behemot that you have to give. Pesach, right? All of these donations that should go or korbanot that should go to Beit HaMikdash. Once 3 chagim passes, then you are over. This is the shita of Talakava that we just had, right? So it's not necessarily in any order. First, second, third that passes from where you are holding, you're over. Any 3 regalim. Says the Braita, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Shlosha regalim kesidran. Rabbi Shimon says, no, it has to be in order. So we already discussed what that means. Hakamatzot chila. So you have either 3 regalim, 4 or 5. Based on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, no, kevan shavar alech chag regel echad. Any regel, the first regel comes and you didn't donate, you didn't give, you didn't fulfill your neder, you're already over with Bal Tacher. That is the definition of Bal Tacher. Says it made, you get 1 bite on an apple, the first chag comes, you didn't do it, you already are in trouble. That's the third one. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, right? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, whose words are very, very counted and limited, but halakha is always like him, says, Kevan she'avar she'avru alehen shnei regalim. He says, no, not 1, not 3, 2 regalim, right? Once 2 regalim pass from wherever you are, doesn't have to be in order, over Bal Tacher. And finally, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Shimon, disagrees with his father also and says, Kevan she'avar alehen chag HaSukkot. He says, it's not 3, it's not 2, it's 1, but not just any one. Like Rabbi Meir, who says any chag that passes, but it has to be Chag HaSukkot. You go through the year, you hit Chag HaSukkot, you didn't finish bringing what you need to bring by Chag HaSukkot, you're over on Bal Tacher. Over alehen Bal Tacher. So Gemara says, why Tama? The Tarakama. At least we're going to get into the Tarakama discussion today. See, where do you see that Bal Tacher has to do with Shalosh Regalim? Right? Where do you see that? So Mifti, Minayu Salik. The pasuk is talking about Shalosh Regalim. The pasuk more is talking about the 3 regalim during the course of the calendar, and you don't have to repeat it again. You don't have to say the name of Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaShavuot, or Chag HaSukkot again. You just mentioned it, much in the same paragraph, and it says in the pasuk over here, Shamor et Chodesh Aviv, v'asita Pesach LaHashem. Keep Chodesh Aviv, Chodesh Nisan, do Pesach LaHashem Elokecha, ki b'Chodesh Aviv motziach LaHashem Elokecha miMitzrayim. Laila explains the reason for Pesach, and then Shiva Shavuot is Porlach, ma'achel chamesh b'akamat ha'chadis Shiva Shavuot. Then you count 7 Shavuot. Afterwards, Chag HaSukkot ha'aseh Shiva Yamim, ve'osvacha migornecha mi'ikvecha, and he says Chag HaSukkot as well. Right. So this is the paragraph that you're coming from. Not just enumerated, but explained all of the 3 regalim. So why do you have to explain again right afterwards? Again, this is all in Devarim Perek Tet Zayin. This was the Psukim 1 through 13 that we just skipped through. And then, mamash, 2 Psukim later, it says, Shalosh ba'amim b'shana yera'eh kol zechurcha et pnei Hashem Elokecha b'makom asher yivichar. 3 times a year you should come up to Beit HaMikdash to see Hashem. Save me the trouble of the names. Are you just coming from those 3? You have to go back and say, why do you say it again? I don't need to hear it over and over and over. You just mamash 2 psukim before you told it to me. So says the Gemara, why do you say it again? It's coming to teach you halacha of Bal Tacher, that 3 regalim passes of your neder. When he says Don't see Hashem empty-handed means that if you came empty-handed and you didn't fulfill the nidarim or the obligations that you had, you didn't fulfill it. You came empty-handed without the korbanot, without the maaser, without the bechor, without the korbanot that you had to bring. Then you're going to be over on Baltachas. It's a basic platform of the sugya, and now we have to explain. First of all, how do the other Tanaim who say one or two deal with this? This seems to be a pretty open and short case that you need three regalim. And where does Rabbi Shimon see that it has to be in order? All of that, Bezat Hashem, we'll discuss, and Bli Neder will come back to the Daryavesh rate, rate of being a Jew or not being a Jew as well in the next shiur.